you hear me okay?
I can hear you, man. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Yeah. So just I gotta let you know I'm recording. Is that okay?
Yep. Yep.
Perfect. Just gotta get permission. So how you doing, man?
Not too bad. Just out here in Nanaimo, hit the
Lovely. What are you?
gym. So
Yeah.
yeah.
What's your schedule like? I mean, you're a busy guy, but what? Thanks for making time for me today. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, of course, man.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
would like how many days a year are you on the road? Stuff like that.
I'm on a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just go, go, go.
I think every weekend, yeah. But yeah, it's I got a good run coming up here because I do this Hungry for Laughs tour tonight, which is a theater show. Alex McKenzie, that should be fun. And then yeah, and I think I got a private show for the Calgary Flames, like the NHL team Wednesday. And then next Saturday, theater show in Vancouver, Commercial Drive Association. So that'd be fun. And then yeah, Sunday, go to Peru to do ayahuasca. So that's a lot.
My goodness. So that
Yeah.
that's so much variety in like even just a short amount of time. When you're designing routines, do you have can you pay any mind to the crowds and try to adjust per show? I saw you for the first time in Powell River, and compliments to you, sir, because we chew up comics and spit them out. Like we're a
Yeah.
brutal crowd up here, just
Power
absolutely
would be
brutal.
tough. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Simon King came up here, and like I had seen him before, but he was just like, wow, that's just a rough bunch of guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did a good. But my compliment to you is that you did a great job of kind of harnessing what energy they had, and like there's lots of great things about that show. I was so impressed. I wanted to reach out to you personally and just you and your wife are both fantastic, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
just and for our town to get you guys up there and that level of comedy is really really special. So thanks for coming up. Like we appreciate that.
Yeah, man. I was pumped to be there. It's a good time.
Sweet, sweet. So I got a few kind of like official questions. I also have a few things like I asked some people in my circle what they would ask a stand-up comedian. So I got some kind of some follower questions they wanted to kind of throw at you. But I did some research. So there's a lot of stuff that you talk about in your routines. You're seen as being I'd say very tight comic, very relatable. People kind of a lot of the comments about the way people talk about you is you're very relatable. How do you design your uh, material so that you come off as authentic? I think that's a an issue for some comics is they can't like break that barrier of kind of being there with the audience in that moment.
Yeah, that's I think I appreciate that. That's definitely something for I aim for with authenticity. And I think comedy, I mean, comedy is kind of a beautiful art form in a sense that it there's so many different ways to do it. And there's a lot of amazing comics who share there's nothing personal on stage. It's all made up and it's all just jokes, which I love. I think that when it's done well, that's funny too. And there's yeah, people who are weird and alt and do stuff and that's great. And but yeah, just I think generally just the way my brain works is just sort of conducive to storytelling. Like I have a degree in English, and so I've always kind of liked writing and just even when I started comedy, I'd go on the road with comics and tell them stories in their car, and they'd be like, "Man, you have to tell this on stage." So, and I kind of always wanted to do that from the get-go anyway, and it just so that sort of lends itself into the style, and then but really ultimately what I aim to do is be the same guy, off stage and on stage. So it's like, I'm sitting backstage telling a story, and then it's like, hey, you got to go tell jokes now. And it's like, there's no transition. I mean, you turn it up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously you can like embellish a few things or tighten some timelines and stuff. But I really try to keep it like as true to what happened. Cause I just think in my life, like the funniest things are those kind of real stories. And there's, there's a certain underlying truth and thread that everyone can dial into. But I don't know. And then I love comedy, and I think if I never try to put it on the audience, so even if it's a tough
Right.
audience, sometimes it's just like the show, and sometimes there are just terrible audiences, and it is their fault.
Okay.
But most of the time, it's not. And you kind of I just try to like feel the vibe. What are people into? And there's it doesn't I don't always have incredible sets, but I try to more often than not do well. But yeah, I just try to not have the person on stage. I'm more and more I try to make it as close as to who I am off stage, or as real as what's going on. And a lot of the comedy I enjoy is like that. So yeah.
Along those lines, like you're with that viewpoint of the world where there's kind of like an underlying truth. When you're walking around in the world, you just go, "That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke." Like, is that the way your brain goes?
Yeah, I think as you do comedy, you know, I've been doing it, I think almost 15 years now.
All right.
But as you do it, your brain just starts to work like that because you're always, I mean, you're doing shows most nights. And so if something funny happens, yeah, you could be like, oh, that might be something. And you really start to see the characters in life, which is almost everybody you meet has something funny about them. Yeah. And I think you just get kind of fine-tuned and dialed into looking for that stuff. And
Is there a
yeah,
dark side to that though? Is there? I mean, when you're always looking for the funny. I mean, I know I've seen relationships break up and people fight and stuff like that over one joke. Do you know the power of that if you do it the wrong way?
yeah, that's definitely a hazard in comedy. And I've had, thankfully, most of my relationships are pretty cool. My wife now is fine. We're both comedians. She'll roast me on stage a little bit. I'll roast her, but it's all kind of done from a loving standpoint. So there's no maliciousness there. So that's fine. We're pretty cool. And she's yeah, pretty low maintenance too.
What about the general public though? Like when you're out in the wild, and you run into people who might not be quite as familiar with the comedic arts as you are. Do you have to comedy it down to just be in a group of people, or can you be your authentic self? And do you know what I mean? Is there a level which you have to meet people at, otherwise they start feeling comfortable that you're just too funny for them?
Yeah, I don't know what's too funny, but I definitely turn it off a lot. Like even I'll work a day job and people are like, "You're a comedian, you're not funny," and I'm like, "Yeah, this is work. It's not funny, man. There's no joke here." But yeah, I tone it down, and there's like I love being with comics because that's just an amazing thing. You can be any city in the world and you meet up with comics, and you know there's going to be people that are going to be inappropriate, and you can do some jokes. But it's funny watching some comics that can't turn it off, try to function in a normal environment. And yeah, I think the dark side too. Like one of my good buddies is Dave Merhaj from the show Rami, and amongst other things, but very funny comedian. And yeah, it's like, well, he said to me once where it's like we just talk about like when the worst things in life are happening. Like there's once he was like going through a breakup, and you're kind of like, part of you, I mean, your heart and everything's like, oh man, this sucks. But in the back of your head, you're like, but it's gonna be pretty funny when I tell this story on stage. So it's like everything, there is that weird dichotomy or duality.
You're carrying around a silver lining in your pocket everywhere you go.
Yeah. And it's like so many times this bad things happening to you, but there's that underlying thing where you're like, yeah, but it's probably gonna be funny eventually. Or there'll be some jokes here. So yeah, you learn after a while. And I've gotten into some trouble of joking at inappropriate times, and even yeah, when I first started comedy, a job I was working, I remember I made an inappropriate joke, and the like president was like, "Oh, that joke was out of line," and I just was like, "Oh, my bad, it was," and it wasn't even that bad of a joke, but not good for an office setting. And I was just like, "Oh, I don't think I should work here anymore."
Sure.
Yeah.
On that note, do you have an opinion about comics pulling back jokes or making apologies for jokes in a public way? There's been a ton of back and forth, especially over the last few years. I don't know if it's wokeism. I don't want to call it anything, but cancel culture, whatever, where comedians get on stage, they say a joke, one person loses it in a comedy club, and all of a sudden that's the clip. Does that affect your work at all? I mean, in a professional setting?
Yeah, it affected comedy. It got really bad for a while. And I think it's always just people who I think take a movement. There was sort of a necessary movement, I feel, in life. Like there's sort of the Me Too movement, and some people got called out that should have been called out. But then there's just people who will take it too far and keep pushing it, or make it kind of like their own selfish version of it, and like pervert the meeting. So there was some good in that, and there was a lot of things called out that were over the line, and you know, even in comedy there was like kind of a push where it's like, hey, there's too many straight white guys doing it. And I agree with that for a while. You know, 10 years ago, that was kind of the thing, and there was a push against that, and to have more representation in festivals and all that. But it's made comedy better. Like now there's something out there for everyone. But overall, I think if you're like a humorless person looking to get offended and you go to a comedy show, like just don't. Like do anything else, because there has been people that like there's people have so many funny stories. There was just one I heard the other day where somebody was complaining about something, like, I didn't like when you did this accent, and it's like, oh yeah, it's like, what did you think about the German accent? Like, oh, that was hilarious. Like, there's like, it's just the thing specifically that pisses the people off. Yeah. So I the woke thing, like, I'm not a anti-woke comic, and there's offensive comedy. I think if you advertise your show as offensive and people go to it, that's a whole thing. And it's done well. It's great and hilarious, and it's a joke most of the time. But I think there's also another extreme of, like, if you're just a brutally offensive, unfunny comic and you go to like a normal comedy show and you're just saying horrendous shit, like, you're ruining everyone's good time. The comics,
like Rodney Dangerfield. He started off clean and he was a clean comic for years, and then somewhere in the 90s, I don't know, he just kind of started telling really dirty jokes, and his humor got a little worse. The comic, like, part of him that was really I don't know, pure, or had a real, like, clean bit to his routines, kind of disappeared, and it was all just about, some dick joke or some, grab an ass joke or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think he was a genius in his own right. But yeah, I do think there's and I'm by no means a clean comic, but I try. And I've done it. Like, I've done jokes that push the line, and I've had somebody come up and be like, hey man, I didn't appreciate that joke. And I always take that into consideration a little bit. And but you can't change your act for one person. But if you have multiple people being like, hey, I hated that. But I do think part of comedy, like in the purest form, is to push boundaries and upset people a little bit. And the truest, like, greats kind of do that. There's like Bergazzi, who doesn't do that at all, and it's just amazing. But then, like, Bill Burr will, like, push some buttons, or Chappelle, but then they kind of bring it around in a way where you agree with them, and they're being self-deprecating, and they're not taking a side, and it kind of, is all about primarily the laughs, and then a little bit about the message. So yeah, I get everyone's point in that, but it got pretty bad there for a while, where I think
seems to be settling out a little bit more now. There's an equilibrium.
The pendulum swung a little bit back the other way, but there was, like, the fad to get offended for everyone. And I think the intentions of that started out good in the movement, but then over time it kind of got corrupted and a little too far. And some people caught some flack that shouldn't have. But yeah, overall, that's just what comedy is. And I'm actually working right now with a guy. First, I just met him yesterday, Amos Gill from Australia, but he's opening for Jim Jeffries and Jimmy Carr on tour right now. Super funny guy, but he had a huge thing of, like, somebody took a clip, took it out of context, made a news story about it, and, like, international news of, like, comic abuses domestic violence victim, and blah. It's like a whole thing, and just hearing his side of it, where he was like, man, it was like a joke that turned
joke.
Turned into this huge thing. And I watched his act, and he's not, like, over the top offensive, whereas, like, Jim Jeffries is and has been and is still hilarious. So when you hear that side of things, and you're just like, oh man, this sucks. And I think he handled it really well, and luckily has a bit of a legal background as to how he approached it. But there's been some other comics that just got, like, bombarded, and it ruined their life. And some people got caught up in stuff and never returned. Like, it just crushed their comedy spirit. So that, like I said, some good came out of that, like all movements, but then it kind of gets too far, and you could feel it. Like, shows weren't that fun for a while, because
you could smell it. You gave up a lot for comedy, like you selling your home, pursue your career. That kind of, like, leap of faith is not. I don't want to say it's not common amongst comics, because I've actually heard that story a few times. But to be successful, that is uncommon, to kind of go that extra mile. And you've kind of, as far as I can see, you're landed in a very firm professional place here. Can you give a little bit of was it a good thing to do, jumping in? And would you tell other young comics, give them, like, that type of advice? You got to go full tilt, or be cautious?
That's a good question, because I think I could have been smarter about it. I definitely just like, I love this comedy, I want to go all in. I think for me too, I'd start it later. Like, I started when I was like 30ish, and then I was like, oh man, I got some catching up to do. So I just lived on the road, sold my house, and I would go do gigs even if I was losing money or breaking even. I didn't care. But I think in today's world, comedy's changed so much, even from 15 years ago, where you started out, you just go on the road, like, you just drive town to town, and nobody knows you, and you kind of go on stage, and yeah, it wasn't really about the individual comic necessarily, and that's completely changed now with social media, and you can promote yourself. So it's almost, we're talking to some successful comics, that it's like comedy is only like 50% of the equation. For some people, it's like 20% of the equation, and they're great actors, you know. So, yeah, I think I really took it to the utmost extreme and lost everything. Lost my house, lost all the money. Got to where I was like negative 25 grand in debt, and then kind of moved to Vancouver, and slowly have built my way out of that. So I could have been smarter about how I did that, and I was not at all cautious about everything. So I don't know if I would recommend go to that extent. I think you could still maintain a job, but yeah, I think in today's world, you've just got to be so multifaceted in comedy. So it's like, learn the social media, hit shows at night, definitely keep like some kind of other income coming in when you're starting out, because comedy, it's the other thing too, is eventually it gets to a point where it's better and you're doing better paying gigs and you can make a living. But it's just nice at that point too, because you can turn down, like, it's nice to have some freedom in what gigs you do. Because if somebody's like, hey, go drive to, this town 9 hours away to make $75, and you're like, okay, I'll go. And, like, whereas now you'd be like, nah, I'm not gonna do that.
You know who that sounds like? I've interviewed a few wrestlers, like pro wrestlers.
Yes.
You guys have some of the same traveling stories, and relate to each other. Like comics relate to comics the way wrestlers relate to wrestlers. Like, you can only talk to them in that kind of professional way. The hotels, the food, the stuff like that. You guys have so many things in common. You guys should maybe meet the two things somewhere up there. Like, they haven't combined comedy and pro wrestling in a long time.
Yeah, you're right. There is like one wrestler, if you ever get a chance to talk to him, Randy in Vancouver, the Weirdo Hero. He's awesome. He does well. Yeah, check him out. Super nice guy. But yeah, it is weird that it doesn't. But I know a few wrestlers. I've even done like a Q&A show with Bret Hitman Hart and stuff.
Oh, he's my hero. That's awesome.
Yeah, such a cool dude. And yeah, it's like wrestlers and strippers and comics. The three of us leave the same. Like, but I have so much respect for wrestlers, because not only are they living that same lifestyle, constantly on the road, doing this, not always the best paying gigs, especially when you're coming up, etc., but they're like putting their bodies on the line too. So it's like a whole other level of sacrifice. But yeah, they're always the coolest guys, best stories. Like,
so I like talking to you guys. You guys are pure entertainment. It's in your blood. Whether as strippers too. You know what? That's probably going to be my next book, and I'll try and get one of them.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and it's funny. My wife always says too, like, she's like, because in some comics, like, you talk to them, and it's like, what would you rather do if you weren't a comic? And a lot of them will be like, man, I wish I was a rock star, or like a lot of them want to be actors. But my thing is like wrestler. Like, if I knew you could do wrestling when I was 18, I 100% probably would have started like training in that. But yeah.
What would have been your wrestling name? Do you have one?
I don't know. I have to put some thought into that. That's good.
Do if you can come up with it, I want to know it.
Yeah.
I was reading some of your stuff. It says you mentioned recording a comedy special in 4K because it captures a different kind of energy compared to audio albums. Like, what role do you think that technology and social media and streaming play in comedy today? What's the atmosphere? What's the ecosystem like there for a guy like you I love your content, by the way. Great stuff on Instagram. I always watch it.
Thanks, man.
What do you do to kind of keep your sets protected, get them out there? There's so much to do. And are you just doing it yourself, or is it you got a team?
Yeah, I don't have a team. That's a great question, because I think comedy is really changed, as I said, and it is all about social media now, whether people want to embrace that or not, in different ways. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned the 4K thing, because when in say 2018, when you do a 4K special, when that was sort of the new standard, it would cost so much. Like, I did one special, it cost me like 12 grand or something. I never released it. It sucked. Like, it was such a bummer. But now all of that technology, at least now you can film in 6 or 8K. And I think if you're doing a Netflix level thing, it's still super expensive because to get to that broadcast quality. But 4K, which is still really good quality, is much more accessible and cheaper. So that's nice that you can do a pretty good special for $5 grand all in with audio and professional video and stuff. And obviously that scales if you really want to get fancy or depending what you want to do. But yeah, I released that special in May that I'm pretty happy with, and yeah, some material I was happy to get out there. And I think right now there's a big movement for crowd work, which I think seems like it's peaked now, or maybe reached its
I would agree, yeah.
point. Yeah. And some people do that really well, like, Andrew Schultz, I think, kind of led the charge on that, and Mark Norman does it well, and Matt Rife, obviously, but they have a team, and Phil Hanley, Canadian dude, but they literally have a team that films every show, and they're really all incredible at crowd work. So that's good because they're very unique with that. I think there was a bit of like pulling the curtain back on the crowd work where there's just the generic, like, where are you from? And you make like, a joke, or like, how long have you guys been together? Like, oh, it took you too long to think about that. Like, which is fine, but it's weird to put clips out of kind of that, quote unquote, like hackier side of crowd work. And I hope, I kind of hope the movement goes away of just like putting everything out day one. Like you just like, hey, that was a funny thing, I'm going to put it online. Because I do prefer myself to kind of see the polished version of something where it's like, taking it on the road for a year and kind of whittled it down. But I think there's two sides to that too, because there's a lot of young up and coming comics that kind of put everything out, and then it's just, you can watch it evolve, and some people are very invested and want to watch every clip, and then you can also release a special, and for the less dedicated fans just to check out or just to have out there. So yeah, but you really, content is king right now, and unfortunately the algorithms are like this, like, beast you can't, that you can never feed fully, and then so it's just like consumes everything. But overall I think it's beneficial because it's made a lot more people can find the comedy they like, and a lot more people can get exposure, and there's not as many gatekeepers or weird kind of club systems keeping people down. And ultimately, like, man, if people are like, that guy's not a very good comic, he's only like 4 or 5 years in, but if he's selling out shows and people after the show were like, that was a good time and I enjoyed that, like, you can't really hate on it. Like, it's just it's how the world is. It's free market, more or less. So overall it's a good thing. But yeah, it has changed, and I still try myself. I think Louis CK has like a few interviews where he references like that it could be bad because you'll start putting all the emphasis on how do I get clips out, how do I succeed in algorithm, versus like, what do I want? And I've noticed that too, like, say if you do a clip and you just mention the town's name in the clip, and then that clip, usually if it's a good joke, will go like viral in that town, and then has a good chance to like pop off elsewhere. So you're like, oh, if I do jokes that mention town names, that will like play better clips. But then it's like, I don't want to fucking do that.
But then you're tainting your material in a small way, or a big way, depending if you're doing it it's a cheap talk, right? Like, hello Milwaukee, hello Wisconsin.
Yeah, absolutely. So that one, I'm kind of like, just write the jokes for the jokes and there's some jokes I do that are not like incredible crowd pleasers. I mean, I always try to make them funny, and I hope they eventually are really funny, but there's some stuff that is funny to me or pushes the limit a bit more. But I just still try to emphasize, like, write every day, try to perform as much as you can, develop the material, and ultimately to like develop an hour. Like, I think I'm going to film my next one in Winnipeg in first week of December, and just so I'm dialing in to do that, get that out there, drop that material.
Speaking of dialing in, high pressure environments, you performed in a lot of them, like San Francisco Comedy Festival, Yuck Yucks. What are those high stakes shows? What do they teach you about performing under pressure, and how do you prepare for them? Do you eat it like breakfast, or do you still get butterflies?
Yeah, yeah. Those competitions are insane. Like, so good. They're so helpful, but they're not for everyone because they are incredibly grueling and difficult. Like the San Francisco and Seattle are two of the best known ones, and they're really fun, and you kind of, the people you do it with, you establish this bond for life with them. And any comic who does it kind of knows what they're going in. And if you win them, like I think Ari Maddie and Dino Archie both won Seattle, it can lead to some cool things, or San Fran, I'm not sure which one, but yeah, the San Fran, when I went in the first round, it's like you do 5 minutes and you're up against 16 comics in a night. Like 16 comics perform 5 minutes, which is insane. And you don't know how you're going to do. And so that pressure is wild and unlike anything you would normally have in a, because if you don't place top 5, like most of the shows, you're not going to advance. So and I remember the first show I did in San Fran, I had no idea how I was going to do, and I got first place, and I was like, whoa, awesome. And then the next one, you know, it's like I don't even know if I placed top 5 or maybe I placed 5th, and I was like, uh-oh. So it's every night is, you know, it's in a completely different environment. There's like clean shows. There's one in like a retirement village. There's one in like a packed, huge, massive theater. There's like a tiny room in downtown San Francisco. So everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. And so, yeah, you really learn to like word economy. Like this got to be tight, laughs per minute. It's got to be insane. You learn like I have to be likable in the first 20 seconds of this and pop to get it. So it's so good for that. So grueling. But it was really fun, you know, that one to make to the finals of that. And I'm still, you know, in touch with a lot of the people from at least that made it through a little bit and made some good friends. So yeah, it's a different world out there, and it's not for everyone. As I said, like some people don't need to do that. But if you're, you know, I grew up playing sports and stuff, so the competitive nature is fun to just dial it in. But yeah, when you have like 6 minutes and you have an 8-minute joke, you learn pretty quick to take 2 minutes of that out and just cut it down and yeah, tighten her up.
Yeah, awesome, man. You're like when you're on stage, is there unexpected things that you've kind of come to over your time on stage? Like, have you learned what's some stuff you learned about yourself that maybe you only could have learned on stage, or is there a transformative process that happens as you're telling jokes and relieving tension from people? It seems like a very therapeutic for the audience, obviously, but what part of that do you take in? I don't want to maybe use the word spiritual, maybe use the word metaphysical. What part of that do you take forward with you as a person, good and bad?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I mean, as far as like unexpected stuff on stage, that's like every single show, more or less. And you really kind of, the more present and you are in the moment with your set, the more like whatever happens. Like even last night on stage, crazy kind of crowd work thing happened, and if you're kind of in the moment of it, you just run with it, and it can be pretty funny. And I think the audience can read that. And you know, I did a set a couple of weeks ago where I flew into Ottawa, and I basically like pulled an all-nighter before, and I went in and asked the club Absolute out there if I could just do a spot, which was a really fun club. And they're like, yeah, they put me on Bullet Spot, which is going first. And I was just like, you know, so tired from the flight and basically straight there. And I just remember like not having that fun of a set, which is such a difference versus if you're like kind of present in the moment and doing well, which last night was more of that type of set. So yeah, there's that going on, but everyone's energy. And I think for that question specifically, as far as like the spiritual side of it, one of my mentors in comedy who sadly passed away last year was Daryl Lennox. And he was like, he really kind of dialed in to, you'd be very vulnerable on stage, which is my favorite kind of comedy when you're just going to put it all on the line. And people really tap into that because I think everyone has those vulnerabilities in their own life at some time. So they can really like, it's just sort of a different level. And after shows, it was crazy with him. Like he would just, because he was blind as well. So he'd sit at the bar and it would just be like a lineup of people waiting to talk to him. And they would just, I would sit beside him and I would just listen to people like pour their heart out and like tell their, you know, like the most personal details. But it was because he was so vulnerable on stage, and he would listen and give them advice and joke around and stuff. So I think that was, and he would remember everyone for the rest of his life. It was insane. Like his brain was a Rolodex. But it's so cool. Kind of, I really liked that part because these people like were kind of more than fans. It was like, you know, there's almost this extra relationship there. So yeah, I tried to, and I think I've still got a lot of places to go and growth to make in comedy, but I strive more for that connection. Like that's really ultimately what I'm trying to get out of it. And then when people, my favorite thing is like if just people write me a message after a show, and sometimes people will write like, you know, a 10 paragraph thing being like, oh, like, you know, if I actually talk about Daryl's death on stage, you know, as you might have seen. And then one of the bits I'm working on now, and then people will write me be like, I lost this person, blah, blah. And, you know, it's like this cool connection you make with people.
There's a
So
constant, you're saying it's a constant interaction. You tell the joke, but that's not the end of the joke. That's not the end of your interaction with the audience. And then it goes on social media, the feedback. It's almost like you're not just putting a thing in time. It exists there forever. And then in the minds and the memories of all these people, that's a lot of power. How do you is there a moral imperative when you have people's attention to try to make the world a better place, or are you just going for the laugh?
yeah,
And I don't mean
don't
just
think
going for the laugh, because I think the laugh can be both things there, maybe.
yeah, I think in comedy you should still go for the laugh. It should be your primary objective. But for me, I don't think there's a moral imperative. You can do whatever you want on stage. You can lie. You can do anything for laughs.
Yeah.
I think that's all part of the art form. But yeah, for me, I do really like to be honest. And then I like when people are like, did that really happen? I'm like, yeah, go ask like whatever this person or this person's. Sometimes I'll change people's names. I'll always change their names in stories, except comics. I use their real names, and a lot of the
storytelling seems to be a huge part of what you do. Do you have any influences? You already brought up a few, whether in comedy or other forms of entertainment that inspire your narratives, or how you tell stories? Because I think it's so beautiful. You've got a great pacing to your routine, with the boom, 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 and then the audience can follow along in a very broad way, but you do it. The language. Anyway, you mentioned English. You can tell you're a writer. It's really nice on stage. So I just want to compliment you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and yeah, it's just one of the styles. And right away, I was drawn to that in comedy. And I think the first, I remember John Mulaney. I don't think there's any video that exists, or any good video of it, but it's like his salt and pepper diner bit is on audio, which is kind of just a dumb story, but it was so funny. Like I remember just laughing to tears, and that was like right when I started comedy. I heard that, yeah, and then coming out of that, I found, so like Mike Birbiglia is known as a pretty good story, or one of the best storytellers. So he's great, but Mulaney, I think, has just grown so much through his specials, and his last one was like really amazing, and I got to see it live, and I was like front row, so it was great to see that. And then Ali Sadiq right now, I think, is just so good, and I got to work with him once, and he was such a cool dude. So yeah, those are, when I look at that, I think there's, as I said, there's still a lot of places I can go to kind of get more vulnerable. And it's funny, I would always talk with Daryl about that, because he was wildly confident on stage, but confidence on stage, you can't really fake it. Like you can't, I mean, some people do, and they'll create a character that's like really cocky and funny, and that works, but with that style of like vulnerability storytelling, it's you just have to be like fully willing to like let go and let people into your world. And there's a fine line in comedy too, because there's topics like talking about death. Nobody wants to go to a show and be bummed out and be reminded sad things. So there's a way to do it to like make it fun, but I think you can kind of have those peaks and valleys and like those emotional moments, and then as long as you relieve that tension, because that's what everyone's there for ultimately. So yeah, it's a balance, but yeah, I really enjoy it, and I look up to those guys that are doing it the best right now. Yeah.
Awesome. You've done your fair share of podcast interviews, guest spots, this thing. Thank you very much for doing it. I appreciate it. I'm pretty new to this, so thank you. Do you ever feel like podcasting or some of these longer formats allow for you to showcase your stuff in a different side? Like you can go for a little bit longer in a story. You don't have to wait for a crowd, a beat in the crowd. Is comedy heading into that long form, or is it with Joe Rogan and everything that's come of kind of his dominance of that space and being a comic, has it opened it up for guys like you? Is that something you're looking at?
Yeah, I think, my good buddy, one of my best friends, Chris Gordon, and I got a few episodes of a podcast in the bank we've done, so we're looking forward to releasing that. But I think podcast is amazing, and it's so incredible to think from when I started, the podcast boom sort of happened with Marin and those guys, and it was maybe when I was like, I don't know, probably like 2 years into comedy or a year in. It probably had already happened, but when I got into it, and then suddenly you have access to all these comedians' brains, and you get sort of the inside story, and that never existed before, except in books, but it just wasn't quite as prevalent. And yeah, I think podcasts are amazing. So many comics, like Mark Norman and Joe List and those guys that have built, like Kreischer and Segura and obviously Rogan, but it's just so instrumental in their fan base, and it allows people to connect. Well, like Bill Burr's Monday Morning stuff, it allows people to connect and build this way more intimate relationship with people on a weekly basis. And then you kind of get these super fans that'll come to your show. And it was interesting, like with Bill Burr, I'd listen all the time. And then I saw his special, and I was like, oh, his special is kind of all things he was riffing on and doing his, like, during his podcast and talking out loud and joking about, obviously much more refined and better. But then I kind of was like, oh, I'll stop listening to his podcast as much so that his special's like fresher. So there is that side of it too. But I think people want that. I mean, there's a lot of time people are driving to work or at work or cleaning the house where they just need some background noise, myself included. So I love it. I think there's some really good podcasts out there, some really funny ones, some really informative ones. And there's so many sides to comedy too. Like, right now we're talking more of like the creative side of it and sort of that end, but we could also just do a podcast where we joked around and made fun of current events and whatever. So yeah, I think it's more content, and comics, a lot of them are really smart people, surprisingly, even if they play dumb people on stage. And they've got some good opinions and a pretty good outlook on life. So I think I'm glad it's been a new way.
You guys are the right group of people to be like. I mean, from the Daily Show to Rogan to all. I mean, in a way, the truth that you were speaking about kind of earlier in the interview, and looking around for that truth and the comedy in things, it is kind of the heart of what we look for from our news and our reporting systems like that. But we might not be getting an authentic or an objective view that seems to be provided by you guys, who just kind of cut to the core of the thing. Maybe that's why that stuff's so successful. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think if you're like forming your political opinions because of what a comedian's saying, you're maybe not the best idea. But like a frontline approach to tackling something or joking around about it or just getting your head around an issue, it's pretty fun. And there's a lot of people whose opinions I value or that I just like to, make light. Like even my good friend Dino Archie's always like riffing on whatever's going on, and he always has a pretty good take. Usually a little bit controversial, but it's it's just so fun. Like when people are good at that, I can listen to it all day. And
the Bill Burr and John Lovitz sit down.
Yeah,
Jesus Murphy, that was the funniest shit I've heard in a really long time.
Yeah, that's so funny, and they're both pretty good at going at each other. And
okay, so two questions left. If you could perform, meet, work with another comic, living or dead. Actually, let's do both. One living, one dead. Who's on the wish list? Who do you want to see, meet, work with? Somebody who's passed on and somebody who's currently working. Maybe you haven't done work with yet.
Yeah, man, that's a good question. I should be prepared for that question, but I'm not. I think I did thankfully get to work with Norm Macdonald before he passed away and did a bunch of shows, and got to hang out with him between shows and stuff. And I think that was sort of living that version of the comedy dream. And my parents only came to 3 comedy shows ever. And I think the first was when I was pretty new, and I was probably, I think I had a good set, but still probably pretty shocking and weird to see your son do that. And then they came to a theater show with Dave Merhej open for, and then they came to the Norm Macdonald show. But the Norm Macdonald was much further in my career. They brought the Neighbors, and I think it was just a good moment where I was like, maybe they're like, oh, this guy, ruined his life to do, maybe is paying off. But Norm was great because it was like one of those, like, you should never meet your heroes. The opposite of that, where it's like it's just as fun. Like, I think he just embodies, and almost every famous comic I've met in the world thinks he's the funniest guy to ever exist. I think he's just so funny and on and off stage, and there's no difference from him on or off stage. Like, he's the same kind of mischievously, wildly hilarious dude. So that was that. So that kind of checked off that dream. But if it was living, or if it's dead, I think you kind of have to go with Pryor. Like, that would just be so fun to watch him. I think, and yeah, just see what that was like, because I think he was just kind of a phenom, and just his energy. Yeah, and then as far as living, God, there's so many. And thankfully, like in comedy, you kind of do get to eventually run into some of the
Yeah, yeah,
people.
it is one of those jobs, right?
Yeah, yeah, like shook hands at least with most comics I admire, or been in the room, or been able to watch them live and maybe say hello after. Um, but
Maybe not another comic. Who's because I get you got a face for the screen. You could probably make your way to TV and movie one day. So who's an actor, actress? I guess it's all actor now. Who do you want? Who could you see yourself working with? Maybe a comedy pairing or somebody that you're working with.
yeah, I think I'd love to do shows with Bernie Sanders. Maybe I think
Ooh, yeah. What? Bernie Sanders?
yeah,
That's great.
cool guy. I like his vibe. Yeah, I don't know. I know it's funny too. I've got to meet a few actors and stuff, and again, some of them are credible, but some are not. You're just like, these guys don't have much personality. Some of them, but yeah, I don't know, but I just, yeah, I'd love to. I just like people who kind of have a pretty important impact on the world. So yeah, there's I think I would go for some smart people that I would like to meet first. And
oh, that's a good answer, man. I was trying to trick you into answering shallowly, but way to fend me off. Well done. Okay, one last question. This one's from my daughter. She said she wants to know the dirtiest joke you've ever heard.
Oh, I've ever heard. How old's your daughter?
She's 14, but don't worry about that.
Yeah, that's the age where you God. I mean, the dirtiest joke I have, I think you saw me tell, is it's like personally, I'm not a fan of the strippers. You know, how does that joke go? Yeah, I'm not a fan of strippers. Like the same reason I don't like going to the zoo. Like I don't want to pay to watch if you can't fuck them. Which is pretty dumb, bad joke. But yeah, I don't know. Who do you quote there? Like probably Jesselnick or somebody has the darkest joke. I think Jesselnick says,
The heaviest stuff.
yeah, his like favorite joke, or that he referenced, was Louis C.K. right after 9/11, when Louis went on stage. Is like, you can tell how shitty of a person you are for how long you waited to masturbate after 9/11. Like, for me, it was between the first and second towers, which I think is like so funny that he just, yeah, I don't know. So I don't know. I think that's my favorite.
That's gonna land perfectly. I'll fix it up and see if I can give it to her.
Yeah,
well, I don't have much more for you.
Nice.
I just want to say thank you very much. Again, thanks for coming up to Powell River. That was really special to get you up here with your wife, and Alex. That was great. This is going to be put on YouTube at some point. I'll clean it up and dress it up, make it look nice, and I'll send you that before it goes out. And then I'm going to make you up a real nice article. It'll have some pictures. I'll probably just steal them off your Instagram. But if you have any promo shots, I'll get those off you, and then I'll build a little bit of an article around this, and just kind of just sing your praises and tell everybody they should come check you out, things like that. And be about a month, give or take, for me to get all that done, and then you can do whatever you want with it.
Dude, that's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, no rush on it. But yeah, I'll send you over some clips too, and anything you want for pictures. I usually have a folder of recent stuff, so I can fire that over. And yeah, man, that's awesome. Do you do different masks each interview, or is it the same?
No, this is I am so fucking poor, it would blow your mind. So everything I do is like dirt cheap. This is the same mask. I've just painted it. It used to be white. Now it's white black. Now it's white black painted or whatever. So it's just gonna keep going because I can't afford to do another one. So
awesome.
Yeah, it's everything is dirt cheap. Like this whole thing is a kind of an exercise in altruism. So I'm just sharing people's work, talking to you guys, getting other artists to like work and contribute on the articles and stuff, but there's no money changing hands. So it's just kind of like trying to do good for good's sake and seeing if it works under some name, some word that is kind of like obey, but
yeah,
be a little bit more positive, that kind of thing. So that's
sick, man. That's awesome.
You are contributing in a really nice way to what I'm doing, because the comedy stuff right now for my content is blowing up. That Norm Macdonald post I sent you is up to 600,000 views now.
Holy shit.
Amazing. That's just people and I'm working in phenomenology, which means I just want people to see the fucking word. That's it.
Yeah.
That's my game. That's it. Right. So I'm now these comedy posts, these noise comedy posts. I'm gonna start hitting your stuff. I got Simon King. I've been promoting Simon King since back before Simon King was Simon King.
Awesome.
I love that guy. But so I'm
Yeah.
gonna try and pair you guys up and hit you guys with Canadian comic, Vancouver, hashtag stand up or whatever, and try to, because that Norm Macdonald post, like, so high.
Yeah, dude, that's incredible. Yeah, and I hope this, like, I mean, it usually those are the best life pursuits if it's something you enjoy and there's nothing in it for looking for a dime. And sometimes that does translate, especially if we start getting followers and really building that thing. It can weirdly translate into dollars. So yeah, I hope that for you, man. I hope it but yeah, keep doing your thing. I think that's awesome, and I'm happy to help out any way I
Thanks,
can.
buddy. I appreciate your time. Thanks for being such a flexible guy in your schedule and stuff like that. I don't know if people make it to this part of the interview, but what do you got coming up next? I know you mentioned your tour coming up, but like, is there anything people should keep their eye open for? And if they made it to this part of the interview, anything you want to say to all your fans?
Yeah, I think I mean, just check out my album Words Have Consequences on YouTube. That's the latest one, and I'm at Rumors Comedy Club in Winnipeg. It's one of the best in North America. It's such a fun club. I think it's December, that first week of December, whatever that is. So I'm gonna bring a camera crew out there and film the next one,
Awesome.
which I think would be really good vibes. So yeah, hopefully that's out in early 2025, and there'll be more stuff out there. And I'm gonna release some other clips I've been working on from kind of a special that I didn't release. So yeah, it'll be out there. But it's my website. I've got dates on there, and follow me on Instagram, Chris Griffin Comedy. And yeah, man, hope to see people at shows.
Well, don't give up on that knight armor. That was a solid joke, and I thought it didn't get the respect it deserved.
Thanks, man. I agree.
All right, buddy. You take it easy. Thanks again for your time, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks, bro.
All right, ciao.